What year did you start your music career, and could you give us a brief history of the Trust, Animal Bag, and Tater? What year did you decide you wanted to be a musician?
Well, it all started about 6th grade, actually. There was this, when I was in 5th grade, there was this experimental music program, one of those things that they tried out for a year and then just kind of abandoned it, and then it never got into the school systems. But I was lucky enough to be there for it. It was called IME in the 5th grade, Instrumental Music Exploration. Nice. And they would send us out to a trailer out in the back of the school one day each week. And for a third of the year, you would play the violin, or try, they would teach you.
Right.
For a third of the year, you would play the cello, and for a third of the year, you played the guitar. And so I hated the violin. Everything was too close together. I couldn't do that.
Right.
Hated the guitar. Could not get the hang of chords and all that stuff. And I loved the cello.
Right.
The cello was the deal. I liked it a lot. So the next year in 6th grade, we could sign up for orchestra. So my thought was, if I liked the cello, I would really like the upright bass because it was even bigger.
Yeah.
So I signed up to learn bass. So in 6th grade, I started out in the orchestra in junior high, basically, pre-junior high school. But I started out in the orchestra playing upright bass, playing classical music. And so after I had about, 6 months into the bass and was learning how to actually play some stuff, somebody clued me in and they said, well, you know the strings on an electric bass are the same as that upright bass. If you can play that thing, you can play an electric bass. So I was like, Mom, you got to get me I need an electric bass for Christmas, So I ended up with this little area, short scale, it looked like it was an SG style electric bass and a little Zap amplifier that I got for Christmas when I was in 6th grade. And we just started playing electric bass, got all into that. And there was these guys in high school that were needing a bass player. They couldn't find, the bass players were in short supply back then. So there was these guys in high school that were needing a bass player. So they hit me up, man. I'm like a 6th grader. And they're like, hey, you want to come play bass for our band? So I started jamming with these guys that were they were like juniors and seniors in high school.
Wow.
And I'm like in the 6th grade playing bass for them,
Nice.
So I'm going to high school parties and all this stuff, just going, whoa, so this is what high school's like, playing bass at all these crazy parties and stuff. So the next year in 7th grade, I kind of got a band together with some other guys that were my age. It was a bunch of 7th graders.
Was this Iron Horse?
This was Iron Horse.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. And, Sabotage was the band of high school guys.
Right.
That was the first real band I was in, was Sabotage. Nice. And then the first band I was in with a bunch of guys that were my age was Iron Horse. And that started in 7th grade. And, we were playing like, Kiss and Thin Lizzy and, a lot of stuff like that. A lot of, stuff that, our guitarist, David Wilson, his older brother, Jimmy, his record collection and everything was kind of a big influence on us because we would go through Jimmy's records and, pick out, stuff that would be cool to learn.
Right.
And then Jimmy and all his buddies would come see us because they couldn't believe we were like a bunch of 7th graders cranking out all this Thin Lizzy and Kiss and all that stuff.
Great bands.
But, we started actually starting to try to write our own songs. That was our first, attempt at songwriting. And, everything was real basic and, it was really beginner type stuff, but that was where it kind of all started. And that was kind of where the thing hit me that I wanted to write music rather than just cover, songs. I liked, I just never, and especially once I became a vocalist instead of just a bass player, I've never been a really good, cover band vocalist. Right. I'm not good at doing other people's stuff. I've never had the range for it. I've always had to kind of just do it, my way. So I was more of a remake guy than I was a cover guy,
Right.
So we kept that band together. It went through, a few little different incarnations all through high school and everything. And then after high school, I had, a couple little stints. I was briefly in a little band called Runway with Warren Morrison, Amy Forrester, and people like that, and it was a good band. Really good band. We had a girl singer and did a lot of Pat Benatar and stuff like that,
Nice.
But it was really good,
Yeah.
It was a little more polished sounding than Iron Horse was. Well, then I got a chance to join the Trust, which was already kind of an established band here in Shelby. And the Trust was kind of one of those bands that the guy that owned the music store, you know, here at Shelby Music Center, he kind of put the band together because he knew all the musicians in town.
Is that Eddie Cook?
Yeah, well, Eddie was in the band. John Reed was the one that put it all together.
Okay.
You know, John was kind of, you know, since he ran the store. But he, you know, Eddie was playing guitar, Harold Willis playing guitar, Steve Edmondson playing bass, Cameron McNeary playing keyboards, and Ron Philbeck was playing drums. And they had another singer to start off with, but he just wasn't really doing it for the band, you know. You know, it was the 80s. They wanted somebody more with, you know, the look and everything. And I had the Bon Jovi hair and everything then. So they asked me if I would be interested in coming to sing for them. So, you know, they were getting good gigs around here.
Oh, yeah.
They were playing a lot, you know. So I was like, yeah, I'd be interested. So I went, you know, we hit it off, you know, and everything went good. So I joined the Trust, and we were playing like, you know, we'd go, you know, play up around Gatlinburg, and we'd go down and play around Myrtle Beach, and, you know, and all this stuff, and it was cool. We had an old school bus, and we would go around and play shows, and, you know, we were getting out of town and stuff like that, you know, and I was, you know, I was like a senior in high, or I can't remember, this seems like this started during my senior year, or it might have been right after high school, I don't know, but the Trust thing was cool because it was my first experience with actually getting out and going and play, you know, really playing clubs and stuff like that, and getting out and doing some, you know, real shows. And we were the kings of Kate's Skating Rink, man. We could pack that place out full of screaming 12 to 14-year-olds and stuff. It was.
That's funny. That's funny you mentioned that. I have some footage from one of your gigs at a Cake Skate. I've got a whole show, as a matter of fact.
People keep threatening to break that stuff out on me. I was just talking to somebody else the other day that was like, yeah, I was watching some Trust footage. I was like, oh God, where did you get it from? They're like, Eddie Cook. I was like, oh man. So yeah, I'm kind of afraid to watch it. But,
no, it was really good. You were doing
for the time.
You were doing some White Snake and stuff. It was cool.
It was what it was, you know. But the Trust was more of a cover band. You know, we were doing a lot of, you know, doing everything from you know, Head East to Guns N' Roses to Kansas to you name it. You know, we're doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So anyway, but the Trust wasn't much on doing original music. We had a couple of songs, you know, but it never was. It wasn't really going that direction. So while I was in the Trust, I remember I was getting kind of frustrated because I wanted to do more original stuff. You know, I didn't want to just be a cover band.
Right.
So I had gone to see a show in Charlotte. I think it was the band Dirty Looks was playing at the Park Elevator.
Yeah,
back
great club.
in the, you know, mid-'80s. And so I ran into this girl. It was a friend of mine that happened to be at that show, and we were talking. She was like, well, how are things going with the band? I said, well, it's going good. You know, I said, you know, we're playing a lot and everything. I said, but, you know, I really want to do more original music. You know, I'm just really not happy with, you know, just being a cover band, you know. And she said, well, I've got these friends that they are just getting ready to part ways with their singer. And she said, they're pretty much all original, you know. And she said, the drummer's going to be here tonight. I should introduce you to him. I said, yeah, you should. And so it was Boo.
Nice.
You know, the band was Animal Bag.
Yeah.
And so she introduces me to Boo at this Dirty Looks show. We talked for a minute, you know, and everything. And where he's like, yeah, dude, that's cool. He's like, you know, we're doing mostly original stuff. He said, we're kind of heading one way and our singer's kind of heading the other. He said, you know, you know, we're looking for somebody a little more adventurous that's willing to, you know, take a few more chances and kind of, you know, do some different stuff. I said, yeah, man. I said, it sounds great to me. And he said, well, he's like, are you going to be at the David Lee Roth concert? And I was like, yeah, I'll be at the David Lee Roth show.
Nice.
He said, well, cool, I'll bring you a tape of some of our stuff. So for any of you that ever went to shows at the old Charlotte Coliseum, I met Boo in the tunnel.
Nice.
Down there, you know, where the tunnel was.
Oh,
we
exactly.
went down to the floor, and he gave me a tape, a cassette, you know, of some Animal Bag stuff. And he's like, you know, check it out, listen to it. He said, you should, you know, we'll set up a time, you know, you come jam, and, you know, after you listen to a few of the songs, we'll see how it goes. I said, cool. So I go home, and I just listened to this tape, and I learned all the songs on there, memorized all the lyrics, and I showed up to practice, you know, and we finally decided to practice. And they're like, you know, well, what do you want to start with? And I said, whichever one you want, man. I said, I know them all.
Wow.
And he's like, you already memorized the lyrics to them and everything? I was like, yeah, man. I said, I got it down, let's go.
Nice.
You know, so we plowed through the, you know, everything that was on that tape that night in Boo's living room, and just like, boom, like we had been together for, you know, years. and it just went off perfect. I remember there was people that were there that wanted to see what it was going to be like, just like, you know, guys that hung out with the band.
Right.
And they were like, "Damn, that's it, man.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
This is what it needs to be."
Perfect storm.
Yeah. So yeah. And so there were, you know, I remember Boo was like, "But do you think you could be ready in 7 days to open for Crocus?" And I was
Wow.
like, "Sure."
Man.
And so my first gig with Animal Bag was at the Park Elevator opening for Crocus.
Wow.
You know? So I mean, we just went right into it, man. It was packed. You know, it was like the Park Elevator sold out.
Wow.
And, you know, everybody wanted to, you know, Animal Bag already had a good following at the time.
Right.
And so everybody wanted to come see what, you know, the new singer for Animal Bag was going to be like, you know, because, I mean, you know how it is anytime a band
Oh, yeah.
changes singers.
Fans
There's
want to
gonna be some
critique the hell
people
out
that are
of
like,
it.
"Oh, I like the old guy," or something. "Oh, the new guy's great," you know. So curiosity got everybody there.
Right.
And I can remember we pulled off a killer show, man. And when we were done, you know, as usual in Charlotte, it was party at Boo's house, you know, so everybody in the club pretty much left and went to Boo's house. And I remember when I was leaving, Crocus was on stage playing, and there was maybe 75 people standing down there to see Crocus, and the rest of the club had cleared out, and everybody went to Boo's house for this huge party.
Nice.
And that was kind of like the beginning of the Animal Bag thing, and that's when, you know, Boo's, you know, telling me the game plan. He's like, "Well, man, you know, Charlotte sucks. We can't get anybody to do anything for us. We can't get any booking agents to, you know, listen to us or anything because we don't play enough covers. We're going to move to Los Angeles. You know, we're going to move out there. We're going to get a record deal." I was like, "Cool." So, you know, that's what we did. We gigged around for like a year around Charlotte, saved up money, and then we took off to L.A. and, you know, moved out there in '89. And sure enough, in '91, you know, we ended up getting signed to Mercury. And, you know, that was the beginning of the Animal Bag thing. You know, we put out 2 CDs and had a third one ready to go, which was the best one we ever did.
Yes, I heard that. It was so awesome.
Image Damage, it was the best one. Terry Date, you know, that did all the Pantera stuff, and,
Right.
a bunch of the Soundgarden stuff,
Yeah.
Deftones, all that stuff. You know, Terry produced it.
Right.
And it was a phenomenal sounding album, and it was supposed to have come out in '94. And unfortunately, that was during the period that grunge came along and kind of killed off metal.
Mm-hmm.
And we were a little too, you know, on the prog metal side for the grunge crowd, so we lost our record deal, and everything just kind of fell apart. And, you know, that was the end of that, you know, and so, you know, I just kind of, I didn't know what I was going to do after that. We tried, you know, after we lost the record deal, we tried to keep things together, but it was one of those things where, you know, the wind had just kind of been knocked out of our sails, and Rich kind of went off into techno and, you know, electronic music and everything, and we tried to replace Rich and jammed with a couple other guitarists, but it, you know, I mean, Animal Bag was one of those things, it really had to be those 4 guys, you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
y'all are like family. It was not only a band, but family,
Yeah,
and you
and-
meshed so well together.
And then you listen to some of that stuff, man, and you almost forget that for 90% of the stuff, it was a 3-piece playing all that music, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like Rush, you know, because the way that band played together, it filled up so much space that you didn't have to have a bunch of different musicians, but it was everybody's style.
Right.
It was the way Rich played guitar and everything else. He could take up so much space, you know, and everything. And it just really didn't work with anybody else that didn't have that style. I mean, it's just like, you know, and then, you know, so it just kind of, everybody just kind of went their own ways. And I started you know, the beginnings of what was going to be, you know, Tater, and then later Tater Family Traveling Circus, you know. You know, then we ended up losing a couple of the members. You know, Boo passed away in 2001, I believe it was, of natural causes at 35 years old.
That's
you
so
know.
sad, man.
And, you know, nobody expected it. I mean, it caught everybody completely. He had just packed up to go camping the next day, you know. I mean, the only good thing you can say about it is the guy never had to worry about, you know, passing away. He never was sick. He never felt bad, you know, nothing. He just kind of, you know, happened. It happened in his sleep. So,
Right.
you know, I mean, if you got to go,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I guess.
That's
you
the
know,
way to go.
That's the way to go, man.
Yeah.
You know, so, anyway, and then started Tater after that, you know, and Tater was going along pretty good. And, you know, I was still in touch with Rich and Otis. You know, they had formed a band called M4 Messenger, and they were doing pretty good. and they had just recorded an album that was getting ready to come out when Rich passed away. He passed away of a perforated ulcer again, suddenly. Nobody expected it, you know, and so, you know, that kind of knocked the wind out of Inform Messenger sales, and they've just recently regrouped and gotten going again with, it took 2 people to replace Rich.
Wow.
So, you know, but, you know, I mean, me and Otis still stay in touch, and I've still jammed with Otis a few times here recently, done a few little acoustic shows, and sat in with M4 Messenger and done some old bag tunes and stuff like that. So, you know, I mean, we're still keeping it alive, you know, the old Animal Bag stuff and everything, you know. It was a good time, and there was a lot of people that have a lot of good memories associated with that time and that music and everything. So, you know, we still have our bunch that comes out and everything for that. So it's nice to get together and do that every now and then. But my focus now is on, you know, Tater Family Traveling Circus. That's definitely where my focus is, as is Otis's focus is with Inform Messenger.
Right.
And we still do this when we can, you know, the Animal Bag stuff. You know, we're not going to let it fade away.
Right.
But we still both have our own independent bands and our own focus right now. And, you know, everything's starting to go good for both of us. Everything's starting to build up, and I'm glad that we still stay in touch. I'm glad we're still friends, and I'm glad we can still jam together. So.
Right. And that's the cool thing about you guys. Even though, I mean, you made it up to the top of the mountain, you guys never lost focus. You always remained true to your roots. You never had the rock star attitude or anything like that. You were always like, the whole band's so nice and just so grounded and not, you know, up in rock star land somewhere.
Yeah, you know, we were working on, you know, I mean, I guess we were still kind of living in the past, and our expectations for what the expectations we had for the band were maybe a little bit outdated, but you know, we were still looking at, you know, you build a career.
Right.
You know, I mean, so many of these bands, you know, go for the, you know, as soon as you get signed, you try to get as much money as you can from the record label, and you buy cars and you buy a house and all that. You know, we never sold off any of our publishing. We never did any of that stuff for the quick money, because we're going, okay, well, 10 years down the road, you know, when we're making our 8th or 9th album, you know, we're still planning like, you know, we're going to be like, you know, the Beatles or, you know, or somebody like that makes a career out of it.
Right.
And you don't see as many career bands anymore, you know. But you see bands that'll be around for 2 or 3 years, then they're just gone, you know. You don't see anybody. And, you know, part of it's just the way the record business is now. Right. And part of it is just the songwriting and everything. You know, I mean, I just don't think people are writing stuff that has the staying power anymore that, you know, a lot of the old stuff used to have. You know, I don't hear a lot of songs on the radio now that I think are going to be classics that'll still be around 20 years from now. Right. You know, I mean, it's just, you know.
You think that's the record industry? I definitely think they're reliable for the deaths of a lot of bands, because they're pushing them so hard, wanting that next hit, but they don't give them time to really develop like the Beatles did in their career.
I agree 100%. They don't give people time to develop a career. They don't give them a chance to even get their legs before they're, you know, dropping them and moving on to the next thing. If you don't produce almost straight out of the chute now, then you might as well just kiss it goodbye. You'll get to do one album and you're done.
Right.
You know? I mean, and then, you know, I mean, it's just the musical climate now is, you know, everybody wants to be a star. Nobody wants to be a musician anymore.
Right.
And, you know, I blame shows like American Idol and stuff like that put the focus on, you know, everything but the creation of good music.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, they're concerned about the look, they're concerned about the performance, they're concerned about everything but can you write a song?
Exactly.
You know, are you doing something? You know, I'm worried about where the future of music's going to be, and I think really the future of music right now is underground.
Right.
Because the stuff that's in mainstream, you know, I just don't see it. You know, I mean, you listen to stuff that's so big like now, you know, like, you know, Katy Perry and stuff like that, and it's great for right now because that's what's happening. Right. But that sound will seem outdated 20 years from now, and you'll hear those as nostalgia songs on an oldies station, but I don't think that'll be the kind of stuff that people are still out buying, you know, Katy Perry albums 20 years from now. You know, nothing against Katy Perry, you know, I'm sure she's fine, but, you know, I mean, I think that a lot of what's coming now, it sounds like right now, you know, but I just, you know, it's been a while since I heard any albums that I thought I would still hear, you know, like, you know, for instance, you know, An Appetite for Destruction.
Exactly.
That was an album I heard, and when I heard it, I thought, you know, wow, that has the same impact as like, Aerosmith Rocks or something like that. That album will still be being listened to and will be as relevant 20 years from now as it is now.
Right.
And I still feel that way about that one album. They kind of let me down with the ones after that, Guns N' Roses did, but that one album was a phenomenal album,
Exactly.
And so, it's getting harder and harder to find stuff like that now, and I think you really do have to scrape around. That's why, I love stuff like YouTube, but stuff where I could just get on there and just start, I can spend hours on there just sifting through bands I've never heard of and looking at the suggestions on the sidebar and just, going through and finding all the stuff that you don't hear about on the radio and stuff like that. You kind of just got to hunt for the good stuff now. So,
exactly. Well, moving on to the next question, I heard you mention Kiss and Thin Lizzy were some of your big influences growing up as a young man. What other bands influenced you the most when you were growing up?
I was really into stuff. I really liked bands that incorporated a lot of different influences into their sound. I liked Jethro Tull, Led Zeppelin, stuff like that, because those bands had an acoustic side and they had like a heavy electric side or whatever, and I really dig that. I like bands that are multi-dimensional, that don't just have a sound based on one thing. I like bands that are just heavy bands, and I like bands that are just acoustic bands, but the ones that I tend to really keep up with and really follow are the ones that figure out how to take all this stuff and incorporate it into their sound and use all of it and make it make sense,
Right.
So, I've always been a huge Jethro Tull fan, because, on the one hand you've got, Cross-Eyed Mary and stuff like that, and the other half you've got, Thick as a Brick or something like that, but it all sounds like it makes sense coming from them. And then I always love stuff, like groove, or, these riff bands, like, I'm a huge Black Sabbath fan, because, Tony Iommi's just, the king of riffs.
The riff master.
He's just the best. And then, I like a lot of, like, old country stuff. I'm not a fan of new country at all. I think it's just real formula and real predictable. But, you listen to the old, like I love, like, old Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard and, Waylon and stuff like that, the stuff I call real country.
Yeah.
I love that stuff. And, Hank Sr., that's why I like Hank 3.
Right.
Because I wasn't a Bo Cephas fan.
Me neither.
Because it was just, that was too much songs about football and partying and what, it just didn't really seem to have the integrity that, and that's what was so nice about when Hank 3, came on the scene. It was like, oh, this, when you first heard about him, I was like, oh, this guy could go either way, man. I wonder if he's going to, And then when I saw that he looked and he sounded like Hank Sr., and then he had, he could do all that, stuff that sounded like his granddad, but then he had this whole side that was more into like, punk and hardcore and stuff like that. And I was like, hell yeah, that's, that guy's got it going on, So I dug that stuff, so.
So up to this point, what's been the most satisfactory moment in your career as a musician, where you just put a smile on your face and you're like, man, this is what I've been working for? What's what moment would that?
There's I guess a couple of them. One of them was of course getting signed, with Animal Bag, because that's something you've dreamed about your whole life,
Right.
And when you were actually sitting there at the table in the attorney's office with the contracts, actually signing that stuff, and everything, and it was just like almost surreal. It's like I can't believe I'm actually sitting here signing a record deal, and all that stuff. And then, of course, anytime one of the albums actually came out, you were really proud, because that was something you'd spent all that time creating and putting together, and for it to finally get out to where other people could hear it, that was always real satisfying. And then, like, as far as on stage, I remember we played this show down in Tampa called Livestock, and it was like us, and it was like a 2 or 3 day festival thing out in the middle of a field that the big rock and roll station put on down there. But it was us, Saigon Kick, and Anthrax, and
Nice.
Screaming Cheetah Wheelies, and
Yeah.
Green Alpha Quick Step, just like a whole bunch of bands, and we got to go. We played in front of, it was almost 12,000 people there.
Wow.
And the stage was like huge. It was like one of those you see on TV at like, you know, the US Festival or something like that, with the scaffolding and all the lights and the big huge barrier with the photographers down there and stuff, you know.
Right.
And, you know, when we went out on that stage, man, and it's just like people as far as you can see, and they're yelling and screaming, and, you know, it was just like, man, you know, you don't even know what to do. You feel so small up there. You feel like you just have to run around or something constantly to take up space, because, you know, there's so much stage and so little, you know, all these people and stuff, you know, that, you know, and then, I mean, there's some bands I've gotten to play with here recently with the Traveling Circus that have been, you know, we've gotten to do opening slots for, like, you know, Asleep at the Wheel.
Nice.
And, you know, we've done opening slot to, well, we did opening slot for David Allen Coe. We did,
Cool.
We're getting ready to do an opening slot in November for Marty Stewart. You
Nice.
know, I mean, it's like all these people that are like legends, man,
Yeah.
that, you know, and you're finally getting to share a bill with them. And that's, you know, it's just like, wow, man, you know, who would have thought that back when I was playing Thin Lizzy songs in 7th grade, it would lead to this. You know?
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, it's really satisfying, but you know, you just got to stick with it, man, and just never, you know, it gets frustrating, and there's times you wonder why you're doing it, you know, but, you know, you just stick with it, keep plowing, man, and, you know, eventually it does pay off, you know, so.
Right, and you're proof of that, so.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you know, and the payoff, you know, is so much more than financially. I mean, I'm still waiting for the financial payoff. If it never comes, oh well,
Right.
at least I'm happy doing what I'm doing. But, you know, artistically and as a musician, there's a lot of payoffs that are, to me, a lot more important than the financial payoff. You know, just, you know,
Absolutely.
getting to play with some of these people that you've always admired, and getting to feel like you're, you know, maybe not on the same level as them, but you're occupying the same space as them. You know, that's really cool to think that you've worked hard enough and long enough to get to that point. So.
Exactly. Well, my next question is, what was it like, you mentioned Terry Date, what was it like to work with the legendary producer Terry Date on the unreleased Animal Bag album, Image Damage? I know he's worked with, you know, Pantera, Soundgarden, I mean, you name it. I mean, was he, did he have a big ego, or was he just a real cool, down-to-earth guy? Or, I mean,
Man,
what was he like?
He's the coolest guy in the world. And he's got every right to have a huge ego, but he doesn't, you know.
Right.
He looks just like Rick Moranis, and even more back when we worked with him, you know, in you know, the early 90s and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was funny because we'd see him sitting in there at that mixing board through the glass, you know, in the control room, and we wanted him to have the big Spaceballs dark helmet on, you know, because he just looked like he was flying the spaceship.
Dark
you know?
helmet, right?
Yeah, but yeah, that's what, you know, we'd call it dark helmet and stuff, you know. But he's super cool, man, and he's one of those guys, but he pushes you in a way that you want to do good for him. It's not like, oh, that dude, man, I can't believe he's making us do this again. No, he was like, you know, he's like one of those guys, I know you can do that better. I've heard you do better. You know, you can do that better, you know, and all that stuff. And he would make you feel like, you know, yeah, I can do that better. All right, Terry, I'm going to do it better this time. You know, he was good at pulling the best out of you and making you want to do good, not feel like you had to do it again or something like that. I mean, you know, Terry was good about, and then Terry was good about, he was real unconventional in a lot of the ways he recorded and stuff like that. Like, he was real big into trying to record all the basic tracks with the whole band in the room at the same time. You know, he said his thing was he didn't ever think you got the same energy when everybody tracked anything individually. So, you know, when we recorded that album, he put us all in the same big room together and put barriers between us so we wouldn't get a lot of bleed through. And, you know, we all were in there together, you know, during the basic tracks, you know, for that album and stuff. And then we went back and did the overdubs and stuff like that. But, you know, and it was cool to work with somebody that's worked with a bunch of, you know, other bands like that, because he could give you tips that he had kind of learned from other people. Like, you know, when we started doing vocals, he was like, oh, we got to get you a bottle of port wine. He said, because I learned this from Chris Cornell. He said, you take a little swig of the port wine. He said, you're not trying to get drunk or anything. He said, it coats your throat between takes. He said, it keeps your voice from wearing out and everything.
Right.
So, you know, and, you know, to get little tips like that from him, you know, and then it was cool when we all finally wrapped this thing up. He took us to his house. He cooked out for us. And, you know, it was like, you know, he didn't have somebody come cook for us. Terry fired up the grill and Terry cooked hamburgers, you know, and it was cool, man, because, you know, here's this guy that's like a legendary producer and he's cooking you burgers, you know, so we're nobody, you know, so, it was really cool. Terry was a super cool guy to work with.
Awesome. I was hoping that's what you were going to answer because, he seems so cool.
No, he is a great guy. I'd love to see him again someday. If you watch this, hey, Terry.
Right. And I know you've touched on a little bit, but we just scratched the surface. But and you said, why was the Image Damage album never released again? Could you go a little more in depth on that?
Yeah, man. I mean, it was a great sounding album, and it was the you mentioned the perfect storm.
Yeah.
This is the perfect storm of bad. Just kind of hit us. Grunge came along and became flavor of the month.
Right.
And we weren't grunge. I mean, about the grungiest thing about that album was we recorded it in Seattle, and that was about it.
Right.
That's because that's where Terry lived.
Right.
If you want to record with Terry, you go to Terry. Terry doesn't come to you. Right. So grunge came along, and people's musical taste had just kind of changed, and we were still. We had too much Yes and not enough Nirvana.
Right.
We were still doing 12-minute long songs with several tempo changes in different parts and stuff like that, because that's the kind of band we were. We were more like, Rush or something. We were still more, even though we didn't really sound like them, we still had a lot of that prog rock influence going on,
Right.
And then at the same time, Mercury, the label that we were signed to, cleaned house. And what that means is every so often, this happens with all the major labels and stuff, they'll like fire everybody at the label and hire new people because they think it keeps the ears fresh and it keeps people from getting complacent in their jobs and stuff like that.
Wow.
So they went through and they cleaned house at Mercury, and after that, the only guy that was still left that had been working with us was our A&R guy, and that was it. The people that had been doing radio for us, the people that had been doing, publicity and marketing and this and that and the other and all that stuff, they were all gone.
Right.
And then when we got signed, Bob Scoro was the president. He was the head of the label. And Bob was really into us. He got it. He understood what we were trying to do. He understood the acoustic side of it. He was really into us, and he was really into, I think if Bob would have stayed on, our path would have been completely different.
Right.
But they fired Bob, and they replaced him with Ed Eckstein.
Right.
And Ed was the guy that was responsible for signing like Vanessa Williams and Tony and
Right.
stuff like that. And so instantly the whole focus of the label kind of shifted to R&B
Right.
and stuff like that. If you notice, that was a really dark time for Mercury rock and roll, because
Right,
that was, all of a sudden all these bands like, Scorpions, Kiss, Bon Jovi, all that just kind of fell into obscurity for a little while and went away.
Of course.
In the early 90s. And that was because, the whole focus of the label changed. They weren't a rock and roll label anymore.
Yeah.
So, we had this great label, this great album ready to go.
Wow.
And, everything just kind of fell apart around us within the label. And I knew that it was doomed
Right.
when we delivered this great album to them and to them, and they came back to us going, we don't really hear anything we can send to radio. We want you guys to go back. We're going to put you back in the studio, and we want you to pick a song that's already been a hit and do like a remake of it. And we're like, oh man, this is heading down the wrong road now. Man, they don't get it. They don't understand it. They don't know what to do with it. And we pretty much knew that it was over then,
Right.
But, and the sad thing was, the album was finished.
Wow.
And we had all these other labels, like smaller labels, like, Roadrunner and Metal Blade and all these other labels that were interested in buying that album, buying the masters and releasing it. But, Mercury, Polygram, whatever, they priced it so far out of these smaller labels' range that there was no way they could afford to buy the masters to release them.
Right.
And so instead, the album just got shelved and was probably used as a tax write-off and never saw the light of day. And, the best thing that Animal Bag probably ever recorded, is probably still sitting on a shelf somewhere.
And that is such a tragedy. That's
It
like
is.
throwing away a winning lottery ticket because, you look at Spirits of Grass, you look at Stupidity for Art's Sake. How mean that album was,
Oh,
and,
man.
and your vocal performance on that album. They obviously, they don't know anything about music if they shelve that album.
What's sad, man, I listened to that album, and, that album was supposed to come out in '94. And I listen to it now, and it sounds like the stuff that's out there now.
Yeah, it
That
holds
album
up very
was
well.
so far ahead of its time. And, we were doing the stuff like, the guttural vocals and stuff like that before anybody else was doing it back then, especially in more of a mainstream, type presentation.
Yeah.
I mean, we were doing a lot of stuff, and I just really feel like that was an album that somebody really just missed the boat on that one, man.
Totally agree.
And you can still find it on eBay every now and then, and there's tracks out there and everything. So look for it, Image Damage. So.
Yeah. Well, this was one of to me, the highlights of your career. I was just like flabbergasted watching this as when I was in junior high. But what was your experience like being on Headbangers Ball in the '90s? That was before the internet. And I mean, that's like we lived for that every weekend, us music fans. So, man, that was like the pinnacle for me when I saw you guys on there. I was so proud of y'all. And you mentioned Shelby on there.
Yeah, man, that we got to do. I mean, our video had been on there a couple of times. But when we found out we were actually going to get to do an interview and stuff, that was like, wow. Because like you said, that was where, if you were a metalhead in the late 80s, early 90s, if you wanted to find out what the up-and-coming metal was, you only had a couple of sources to go to. You could get like Rip Magazine and look at the Fresh Blood section and read about, some of those bands.
Right.
Or you could watch Headbangers Ball and you could see, because, they would have bands on there that you'd never heard of, and stuff, especially if you waited it out to like the end of the night. There would always be some good stuff there towards the end, and then, you'd go out and buy the album the next day and see what the rest of it was like. So, we knew it was a big deal, because there would be a lot of people watching that would find out about us that didn't otherwise know about us. And so that was definitely one of those career highlights you were talking about, getting to go there. And then getting to go, I had already met Ricky Rodman, who was hosting it at that point. My day job when I was living out in LA before Animal Band got signed, I was working for a clothing company called Lip Service. And we did a lot of rock and roll clothing. We would send them, we'd send a lot of stuff to, Skid Row, Guns N' Roses, and bands like that, And so we had done some stuff like, I remember Lip Service did like a big rock and roll fashion show at the Cat House, and that was Ricky Rodman's club.
Yeah.
And so I'd already met Ricky, I knew who he was. But to get to do the interview, on Headbangers Ball was just like, that was like really important.
Right.
And then, there was all that stuff about, I wonder what it's going to be like. I wonder how they do it and all that stuff. Because, you never think about that stuff when you watch it on TV. You're like, I wonder what time of the day they film it and stuff like that,
Yeah.
So, you film it during the afternoon. For anybody that wondered, I think we filmed it like maybe 2 in the afternoon or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And it was cool because we got to go into the MTV studios there in New York. And where they filmed this, it was like they had the sets for all these different, MTV shows. It was all in the round. And like here was the Headbangers Ball set, and over there was the remote control set, and over there was the 120 minutes set, and they had the cameras in the middle where they could just rotate them on this track towards whichever one they were filming. And, so we got to sit there, and do the interview with Ricky, and you're sitting there doing the interview, and you have to kind of keep yourself from looking around the room, but all the other sets to the other TV shows that are in there, But it was cool, man. It was really cool. That was when we were on the road with Ugly Kid Joe and Collision. So.
Nice. And how did you fall into the episode, the My So-Called Life episode? How did you guys get into that?
At the record label, Mercury, Polygram, the label, they have a whole department that their whole goal is to try to get your music or to get the band like on TV shows and movies, things like that, just anything to get your music out there,
Right.
So that department just works on stuff like that. You don't even really know what's going on until they tell you, like, hey, we got one of your songs on like they had some stuff, we got some tunes on like Max Out Sports on ESPN, I think we were on there for like some monster truck stuff or something like that. And then they got us the thing with My So-Called Life, which at the time was just a pilot, we didn't know if it would ever do anything or not, and nobody knew who Claire Danes was. She was just, she was there, she was really young. She was there, her mom was there with her and everything else, and you know, we were supposed to be in that pilot episode. We're the band in the backyard at the party when
Right.
Claire gets thrown in the mud.
Right, that was awesome.
And then every week when it was coming on, it would show us during the opening montage and everything, you know. And, you know, that was really cool, man, because that actually became kind of a, you know, teenage cult classic there.
Exactly, yeah.
And, you know, it's still being, you know, I think it just went into some reruns again over in Europe, you know. So,
Right.
yeah, it's like every now and then I'll get like a royalty check, and I'll go, oh, cool, they must be rerunning my so-called life somewhere, you know. So
Yeah.
I didn't get $12, I got a little bit more. You know,
Right.
so, you know, so but it was cool because, you know, that actually went somewhere. And then we got a couple of things on, like, you know, the Zalman King's Red Shoe Diaries, which was like some of that late night, you know, Cinemax or Showtime, you know, almost like softcore stuff,
Right,
you know,
right.
stuff that, you know, you didn't want your parents, you know, your parents come and flick the TV real quick, you know, so, you know, so that was cool, you know, and you can still rent those things, you know, like Lake Consequence, that one, you know, episode we were in. I think you can still rent it at, like, you know, if there are still video rental places,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. My next question is, how hard was it to convince the record label to shoot the video for everybody in North and South Carolina? I mean, did you have to do a lot of begging and pleading, or?
No, actually, it wasn't that hard, man, because they, with that song having the subject matter about, you know, wanting to get out of the city and get back to the country and stuff like that, I think they saw the opportunity to tie in the roots of the band, you know, our North Carolina roots, in with the subject matter of the song, you know, when they made the video. And so I don't remember us really having to jump through any hoops to, you know, to get that done. The guy that did that video, his name was Troy Smith. He's the same guy that did the video for Hunger Strike, for Temple of the Dog, and stuff like that. You know, he had some, you know, really good videos out. And he was from Seattle. But I remember he came out and, you know, we went around and he scoped out some different, you know, locations. But, you know, it was like, you know, he had kind of a concept, and he was like, you know, okay, well, you know, where could we find something like, you know, an old farmhouse? And, you know, and so, you know, that's how we ended up out at the McBrayer homestead out there in Mooresboro, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, where could we find, you know, like an old industrial looking area? And, you know, we went to Greenville, North Carolina, where, you know, my wife Amanda's from Greenville, and I knew about that, you know, kind of burned out old factory there and everything. So we went up there and scoped it out, you know, just went around scoping out, you know, locations for the video. And, you know, he and his crew came in from Seattle, and, you know, we filmed that thing, and, you know, within the span of a week it was done, you know. So it was just like, come in and knock it out, you know. So that video actually got nominated for a Billboard Award for Best New Video, or Best Video from a New Band or something like that. They didn't win it, but, you know, at least we got nominated.
It's still
So,
quite an
yeah.
accomplishment, yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And, well, here in Shelby, North Carolina, and Charlotte, North Carolina, you've always been known as a rocker. What did your fans think when you made the transition, you know, of genres, and you started Tater? Were they supportive, or they had mixed emotions, or they just didn't know? I mean, how did they feel about that?
You know, I never really caught any flack for it or anything. Everybody, you know, I mean, because even the Tater stuff was not, you know, traditional bluegrass, or it wasn't really it still kind of went into a lot of, you know, different areas, even when we were doing the all acoustic stuff. You know, it was still not, it was still far enough from the mainstream that I think everybody could appreciate where it was coming from. And then Animal Bag had always had an acoustic side too. You know, the album Offering was not too far of a departure from what, you know, we ended up doing with Tater.
Right.
And then, you know, when it started off as Tater, you know, Tater started off as a two-piece, you know, and was really bizarre. You know, we were doing like, you know, Flock of Seagulls songs and Devo songs and stuff with acoustic guitars and a drum machine and congas, you know, and it was really, you know, weird when we first started. And it became a little bit more of a mainstream band. And, but with Tater, it's like nobody really wanted to venture outside of acoustic. You know, it's like everything was all acoustic and this and that and the other. And so there was kind of a, you know, there was a little bit of a limitation on things, you know, because, you know, sometimes there would be songs that you would think, God, you know, if we had an electric guitar in that would sound great.
Right.
But you know, it was not really where that band was wanting to go.
Right.
So when Tater kind of fell apart and the Traveling Circus came to be, then it was like, okay, we're going to lift all the limitations. We're bringing in, electrics and everything else. And so it's become a lot more rock and roll as, the Traveling Circus has evolved. It seems to be coming full circle back around to rock and roll again,
right.
But picking up the elements of all the acoustic and bluegrass and whatever, all the paths that Tater went through. That was the whole journey of Tater was a necessary journey for the evolution of where we are now, and I like doing stuff with a little more rock and roll to it because, that's just kind of where my heart is. I've always been, like I said, I've always been a rocker, and that's always been, at my core. So it's nice to get to go back and revisit some of that, again, and incorporate that back into the sound. So.
Well, in closing, with my last question is, it's actually about the Family Traveling Circus. What is Tater Family Traveling Circus's future plans, and what do you hope to accomplish with your band?
Well, we just released our first CD, with the Traveling Circus lineup. Curiosities just came out in June, I believe it was. And that's the first CD that we put out that's really a representation of where the band is now. It's and a lot of the songs on there are songs that I had previously written, and we recorded some of them with Tater, but with Tater, we never actually went into a studio and did anything. We always, we always kind of recorded everything on our own. We had our own little studio, and we would set up in bass player's basement and record stuff and things like that. And it all came out sounding good. But it was like one of those things where we're having to try to engineer it ourselves, we're trying to produce it ourselves, we're trying to track everything ourselves, we're playing everything ourselves, and scraping equipment together, whatever kind of mics you got, that's what you use, that kind of thing. And with this new, with the new TFTC album, it's the first time that we've gone into a studio again with a good engineer and spent some time and actually recorded everything the way we really wanted to record it. Had it sound like we wanted it to sound and everything, so it's nice to have an album that you really are proud of and you're really going, this came out great. This came out like we wanted it to come out, And a lot of those songs that I didn't feel like I got a fair shake before because of either poor audio quality or whatever, to get to breathe some new life into some of those songs and have them come out like you knew they could sound, and give them a second chance. So that's a lot of what a lot of this album was taking a lot of those songs that I didn't feel like got a fair shake and songs that you felt like could have done something if, this would have been different or if that would have been different or whatever. So that's why we chose to take a lot of those songs and do our version of them because I felt like they didn't really get a fair chance before. So it's nice to hear some of those songs be what they can be. And now that we've got this new album, now we've got the equipment to start really moving forward. Before it was kind of hard to book shows or get on some of these festivals or do stuff like, submit stuff for like, soundtracks or whatever,
right.
Because you didn't feel like you had an accurate representation of what the band sounded like now.
Right.
And I didn't want to, you don't want to submit to it for a festival sending something from the last band when this band is completely different,
Exactly.
So now we're to the point that we've got the ammunition, we've got the package together to really start moving forward. So what I'm hoping for the future is to really be able to, with this next year, I'm going to start submitting for, see if I can't get us on some of these, festivals and, get us playing in front of some bigger crowds. See if we can't, get some more shows, expand our tour in the area a little bit. We've kind of just been stuck in this little southeast loop, for a little while. And so it would be nice to, one of my goals, I would love to, hit that southern route and play out to like Texas or something, and come back and start, doing some little, tour stuff and everything, like where you go out, book little tours where you go out for, a couple of weeks and then come back home.
Exactly.
And stuff like that, and expand our coverage area on the touring and stuff like that. And then, we've run into some good opportunities here lately. I've got a buddy that works for a big outdoor company that does like outdoor sporting goods, and they're got a couple of tracks that they might be using on like some video stuff that they're going to be releasing, for some promotional stuff. And then he's this guy's also filmed some pilots for an outdoor cooking show and used some of our music in that and
Very
stuff,
cool. Yeah.
And this is all stuff that there's the possibility this could stuff could get picked up by networks and stuff like that, so it could really lead somewhere in the future. And so my thing is to get as many irons in the fire as possible, man, and hope that something pays off. Just get it out there. Start trying to promote this thing as much as I can. Get the music out there to as many people as possible, and just explore as many avenues like what we're doing right now.
Right.
Just film. There are people that are going to watch this that have never heard of the band that'll find out about us.
Exactly.
So anytime have an opportunity to do something, or anytime, I wish there were more people doing what you're doing and giving independent bands a chance and another platform to get out and reach people that might not have otherwise found out about them. So that's great. So just do whatever we can to get the music out and play as much as possible over the next year, and start working on writing stuff for the next CD whenever that happens. So.
I just want to say good luck with your career, and I know, like I said, the good fortune is not it hadn't stopped yet. It's going to keep going for you guys. You've always been a class act, and you've never snubbed anybody when they wanted to hear a Animal Bag story or any of your other band stories. And I just I think more musicians should be that way, because you're so down to earth and so good to your fans. And I want to thank you, and that's a tremendous honor having you on the show, man.
And thank you, man, and that means a lot, because we've always tried to different people get into music for different reasons, and a lot of people get in there because they want to be famous or be a star, and then some people get into it because that's just what they do. They feel like that's what that's what my day job right now. I'm a maintenance man.
Right.
But that's what I tell people. I didn't blow off college to be a maintenance man. I blew off college to be a musician, and I'm still trying.
Right.
So. You just have to keep everything in perspective, and still do it for the right reasons, and just be appreciative of everybody that gives you the opportunity to do it, and keep doing it. So to everybody out there that's ever been to a show, or might come to a show, or buys a CD, or listens to a song and digs it, or whatever, thank you. That's why I'm still doing it, after all these years, and that's why we'll keep on doing it. So thank you, appreciate it. Really enjoyed being on the Stick Elliott Show, and I hope after the next album comes out, we can do it again.
Absolutely, thank you. And if you want to purchase any Tater material, Tater Family Traveling Circus, tatertime.com, right?
Yep, tatertime.com. Come visit us there, and keep up with what's going on, see where we're playing, and come out to a show.
All right. Thanks a lot, Luke.
Thanks, appreciate it, man.
All right.